the chat if that's available to you. I think it would be. So afternoon. Thanks for coming out on such a glorious day. We didn't realize it would be a Knicks playoff game and some of the best weather we've had all spring when we scheduled this, but we wanted to be able to share an update with you. And it's recorded, so people will be able to watch this back at their leisure as well. My name is Mike Aziz. I've been in Irvington for a little over 10 years now. I am, along with Arthur, co-chair of the Facilities Planning Committee. We're both architects. We both do the type of work that we'll be talking about here, designing buildings, community-focused buildings, or planning for communities, in my case. Our committee includes a number of other folks. David, who I'm sure many of you know, Michael Hanna, Scott Rothstein, Sue Robinson, Dylan Douglas, Kami Futura, John Price, Lori Roos, and Andy Raffel are the original committee members. Have all been involved with us for the last year and a half, 2 years maybe now, in the work that we're going to share with you. So this is intended to be just a snapshot, an update of where we are with this facilities planning process. We'll walk you through how we got to this point, what we're helping the village with now, and then where this is going to go, what kind of decisions you can expect to be made over the next year and a half with respect to the firehouse and other facilities in town. Arthur, do you want to?
Yeah, no, I have nothing much to add to that. Mike introduced me. I'm Arthur Shaban, been in this village for upward of almost 30 years now. And I guess our motivation for being involved in this is to ensure that in addition to the planning element is that you get beautiful facilities, that they're planned well, that they're beautiful, that they're economical. I think Mike will touch more on the details of how the different sites that we're considering, how they support all the goals of the village. And today it's really about making sure that everybody in the village is fully engaged and understands what we're doing, and has a stake in it.
Maybe before we get started, since there's so few of us, we could just go around the room, introduce yourself, and just let us know one thing that you came to the meeting hoping to learn. That way we can make sure we cover it. We'll start at the front.
I'm Eileen Walks. I've lived in the village over 30 years as well. I live up in Field Point, and based on the vote the plan that was voted down last time, is kind of a wake-up call to get interested and involved. So that could be.
I'm Steve Wolford. I've lived here about 12 years within the development. Also, it was a wake-up call for me. Did attend one of your meetings at the library, and
Jeffrey Chester. I also live in Danwood, and I too am interested in furthering municipal services in the village of Irvington and getting into newer edifices than what we presently have.
In the back.
Yeah, I'm Mike Curran. I'm from Field Point Drive. I'm here 38 years. I'm just seeing what is being proposed and how it's going to affect the real estate taxes.
And Larry, we're just going around the room, just introducing ourselves.
Hi, I'm Larry Ogrodnik. I'm going to be on the ballot in November for village trustee, and so I was on the board previously. We get the facilities planning committee started, and so just excited to kind of see the progress and see where things are going.
Thanks, Larry. And walked in just at the right time. We were just introducing ourselves because there's so few of us. Do you just say hello to everyone?
Yeah, Roy Rose. I'm on the subcommittee for the facilities.
Roy, I've never seen you in person, so nice to meet you. I just said, you're on
Most of the time on that.
is the nature of our Zoom world. So I'll go through briefly sort of how we got to this point. Then we'll talk about the RFP that is currently out and consultants are responding or will be responding to shortly for planning services. And then we can talk about some of the work that the committee's done. So we were formed in 2024, really in response to the failed bond referendum and the desire for the community to have a proactive approach to planning for our facilities, not just for the firehouse, but for all of them in a more comprehensive manner. So our assignment in deliverables as they're defined by the village is to gain an understanding of the current village operations. So that includes fire, everything that happens in this building, recreation and parks, the senior center, all the various departments, DPW. That was our first charge, was to gain that understanding. And then to assess the adequacy of the facilities to support those operations. So first learn what they're doing, why they're doing it, where their constraints are, but then to be able to provide the village with an assessment of how well the facilities are supporting that today. And then to the extent those facilities are inadequate or perceived inadequate in the long term, not just planning for next 3 or 5 years, but looking further out, propose either rebuilding an existing location, improving that facility, or proposing a viable alternative location. So that was what we were asked to do. The things that we were asked to consider in doing so were the 2018 comprehensive plan, which some of you may have been involved in, or at least come and participated in as residents. That plan, amongst other things, suggested the relocation of the firehouse. It didn't say where, but it said it shouldn't be on Main Street. So that's really been a point of study over the years for the village. There's been some 7 studies for the firehouse and its needs, but obviously it's still in that current location. It asked to consider the more immediate needs of certain facilities and infrastructure to support that. So the facilities, but also our stormwater and our other municipal infrastructure that help support the village. The impact on the village historical district, the area we are now, so many of the facilities are within this district, and we need to understand how future facilities could be compatible with what the community's vision is of the district as it was defined in the historic district formation, but also the current opinion. Impact of climate change on location of facilities, obviously most important down by the river with DPW and the flooding impacts that it experiences and has experienced over the years. Benefits that were prepared for the November 2023 bond referendum and the needs identified in that referendum. It was an immense amount of work to be able to develop that concept for the development proposal across the street. And we expect that the consultants that brought on are going to absorb all of that. They're going to vet and validate that work against the current industry standards and the current needs as understood, as communicated by village staff, some 3 years later now almost. But that work really needs to inform what happens going forward. And also to consider the village's limited resources and potential cost of creating new and renovating existing facilities. So to the comment in the back about understanding what the long-term impact could be on resident, on taxes for residents, what the potential funding mechanisms could be for village facilities, not just bonding, but the cost mitigation strategies like grants and public-private partnerships that could offset those. Impact on the existing firehouse and all the facilities obviously to be considered. Revenues of tax-based impact from the disposition of or redevelopment of various properties. The planning study will try to answer the question if DPW is not its current location, what other types of commercial or non-village uses could be there in the future, and then what benefit would that have back to the residents in terms of taxes, in other things. And we were also asked to look at zoning and land use regulation changes that would be necessary. If there are locations that are recommended, does the zoning today support that? If DPW was to leave, does the zoning that's in place there today align with a vision for what might be there in the future? But this planning committee and by association, the consultant that would be working would be answering this question. So that's what we were asked to do. Are there any questions about that before I talk about what the kind of process that we've been through so far? So the process that we've been through has kind of gone in 3 steps. One, there was the failed referendum in the formation of the committee itself, and that happened in late 2023. And then we worked through the deliverables and the charge, as I just described to you, with the Board of Trustees to define what we were going to do. And then we began with what we referred to as a due diligence period. The 12 or 13 committee members were broken up into a series of groups, and we all focused on different topics. One, mission and guiding principles. Building off of the charge that were given by the village, what were some guiding principles that we thought should be in place to inform all the work going forward? So things like create a more vibrant and active downtown for Irvington. I don't have them all at the top of my head, but there were 3 or 4 of them. They're in the documentation that we provided. That's all on the village website. We can revisit that later if you'd like to hear more about the guiding principles. We defined a scope and process of work going forward. So these are, after going through what the village was asking us to do, we translated that into architectural planning scope. So we all understood what the capabilities of the committee were and where there might be gaps in that, where we might need professional consultant. We did a very deep dive into all the past village documentation, studies, plans that were done around village facilities and downtown planning, going back some 40 plus years, and provided a synopsis of all the major plans and studies that were done, and synthesized that into some findings, provided that for the board. A phenomenal job. Led by Michael Hanna, we looked at what would be successful engagement strategies in the village for being able to bring residents into the process. And we talked about making it proactive, going out to the village, not just posting meeting notices and expecting residents to come to evening board of trustee meetings, but filling that gap in there either online or in person, be able to capture people's attention and make sure they're informed. So when one day this the village is asking your opinion, either in the form of a bond referendum or otherwise, the residents really understand what the key issues were and how decisions. And then lastly, exploration of opportunity sites and all around the village. And you'll see a map here. We can show it on the screen later for those on Zoom. Led by David, we canvassed the entire village and looked at every property to understand where there were viable sites to relocate village facilities. Some, I will say, they all come with some type of encumbrance, whether that there's no slam dunk out there. It's why nothing's been done. And whether it be an ownership issue, an environmental issue, a traffic and transportation issue, there are trade-offs with every single potential site that we have potentially available to us. And that includes things that the village doesn't own. There's really nothing out there that we consider that could be acted on immediately without any challenges in place. So all of that work was shared with the board and Larry over the course of a couple of meetings. What the board came back with was a request to define the facilities that presented the highest need amongst all of the ones that we looked at: DPW, police, the library, the senior center, rec center, et cetera. Can we prioritize those in a way that the village could then craft a kind of early implementation strategy? And what was the recommendation was that it was essentially emergency services and DPW. So the fire department, the police department. We're also including IVAC, which is not a village facility, but provides emergency response to the village as part of that consideration because of its location, because of the relationship between IVAC and the village today, and how much we support them. And then DPW, obviously a series of buildings down by the water, really in need of reinvestment. They obviously they use other places in the village as well, but that we felt like really needed to be addressed. So those were the facilities identified at the highest need. That was based on our firsthand tour of the facilities. We toured every one of those facilities with the department lead, so with the fire chief, with police chief, with DPW leadership. We heard from them firsthand where their pain points were. We could actually go and see all the facilities as a group. We went with the mayor, went with other board members. So that was the basis of it, and our drawing from our own architectural expertise. I will say all of that was in line with the 2018 comp plan as well. And what it really illustrates is that we're trying to, in the next step of work, fill that gap between the very high level strategic nature of a comprehensive plan and the highly defined and specific nature of the development proposal that was put forward for the bond referendum. There was something in the middle that was planning, but planning in more of a physical nature that had financial profiles associated with them that the village could use for capital budgeting and for actually executing. We thought there was really a missing piece between those two, and the tour of our facilities really underscored that. When we also went all around the village and looked at these sites, and we created an evaluation matrix for all of the sites, which you could see on that table there, the color-coded table. And what that, maybe I'll put this on the screen.
I would just note both of these are available on the village website. If you just go to Village of Irvington or Google Village of Irvington Facilities Planning, all our documents come up on a page.
So we won't go through all of these. It's very dense, but what it did was it ranked the how many 20 high 20s, maybe 30 sites that were potentially usable for future development, and divided them into the types of uses that we thought would be most appropriate: emergency services, DPW, rec department, housing, maybe village supported housing, but not village developed housing. And within each one of those categories, there are about 3 or 4 that we thought would be suitable for emergency services in the firehouse. DPW is 6 or 7, and none of them could accommodate all of the facilities. We're probably looking at a solution that takes DPW and disaggregates it to several different sites, something they're already thinking about in some ways the way they work today. And this would serve as a starting point for the consultants that would come on. They would be doing their own analysis, but if I was coming into a job and I saw this amount of work done already, I'd feel like the village was really committed and I had a great head start. So that was another piece of information that we delivered to the board. And they said, okay, so where do we go from here? And that's where we kind of put our hands up and said, we have reached sort of the limit of our volunteer committee. We don't have the capacity to take this forward, and we don't have the expertise either. You need engineers, you need cost estimators. This needs to be a multidisciplinary team. So at the request of the board, we develop a request for proposals that for the services that are needed to develop a plan, a capital facilities plan that the board can use in a long-range fashion to begin to improve its facilities. And so we'll walk you through the RFP in a second, but I'll just, where the RFP is right now as a snapshot is we have the Facilities Planning Committee has recommended 4 local architecture firms. They're all located in New York City to bid on this project. They all expressed interest. They all came up to tour the facilities in person with village staff, with us, mayor. And they will be submitting their proposals in about a month. We'll go through the exact dates here in a second. But they're all firms that have that dual expertise in planning and architecture, which we think is very important here. Any planning solution needs to be able to have architecture that's compatible with the village in terms of scale and character and its fit within the site or wherever it's going to be in our community. So we thought that was very important. Those 4 firms are Robert Stern Architecture, RAMSA, Robert A.M. Stern Architecture, WXY Studio, Beyer Blinder Bell, and Perkins Eastman. They represent a range of sizes, I would say, in terms of offices, a range of different approaches to planning. And we think that it will provide the village and the board with with varied options for how this could be done most successfully for the village. So we're really excited to have what we would consider really top-notch, highly qualified types of planning architecture firms that any community in the country, frankly, would be lucky to have working in the village, all interested in working here. So that's where we are. Maybe I'll just quickly flip through the RFP and then we'll pause for,
I'm allowed to ask a question.
Please.
So my question is, should a goal of the study be to look at the net cost, including the new revenue streams from taxes on recommended housing or other configurations for increasing the tax base? Is that one of the goals?
Yeah, it is one of the goals.
Could you just reframe the question in case?
So I think the question was, should the study consider what the net tax benefit would be of any potential development that would be enabled by some of the facility improvements in the village? And yes, that is in part of the requested services. Though for that specific piece of scope, we imagine that the village and the consultant will be working very closely on that. That's typically how that's done in this line of work. But it was one of the questions that came up during informational sessions. We're all acutely aware of the sensitivity around that, especially because of the bond referendum.
So my question is, given the board's request to try to prioritize greatest needs and your suggestion that it was emergency services and DPW,
Yeah.
is the RFP and you expect the proposals to come back in to focus solely on those elements of it, or is it still going to be everything?
It'll still be everything. We expect there to be a higher level of focus on that. The scope is generally organized around 3 elements. One, a needs assessment of our current facilities today and looking forward, so-called future-proofing them for the next 10, 15 years, maybe even more. 2, the actual physical testing of sites to accommodate for those future facilities. And that the testing of the sites is physical in nature, but it's also economic and environmental in nature. We'll be looking, some of these sites have flood impacts, and we'll be trying to understand the trade-offs of that. And then the third piece is engagement with the community all along the way. So they really are part of the process and not just there to be informed, but contributing ideas and co-creators in a way of the plan.
But I'd add to that, that also in considering what might be appropriate for one site, if that displaces something that is on that site, let's just say completely arbitrary, if the fire department moved where the DPW is, well, what happens in the fire department site? So it has to be a very comprehensive view. It can't just be about the emergency services.
Yes.
When you did like the postmortem of why the bond failed, did you guys evaluate the things that were in the bond that were needed and what were nice to haves?
No, we didn't. That is really.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to do it at the same
Oh,
time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Repeat the question. The question was, our evaluation or our postmortem of the bond, did we assess whether some of the elements were needed or not needed in the new facility? Is that fair?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for example, the only thing comes to my mind, an indoor shooting range was one of the items.
No, that really is what the consultant would be doing in their needs analysis. They'll be going back to square one, looking at that document and having direct discussions with our staff, but why those decisions were made. And then they will take their own expertise. They'll take benchmarking and best practices from their experience. They'll take compliance regulations, which are most critical for fire services. We will also we also encourage the consultant to go look at neighboring facilities and different villages and municipalities around here to see what they have, whether or not they really needed them when they put them in. All of those things will inform what we would call a program of needs for our village, the must-haves, the nice-to-haves. And those would be put forward as recommendations. So our charge really wasn't to look backwards as much as it was to look forward.
We did look, though, as to why the referendum failed, and mostly looking at it from a community engagement and communications aspect.
Any other questions?
Are we giving people on the Zoom a chance to ask questions?
Certainly, if people want to add questions to the Q&A function, I can surface those, but nothing to date.
So just quickly going through the request for proposals. It begins with the description of the village. It talks a bit about the formation of the facilities planning committee and the desired outcome of the study. It's a singular plan and roadmap to shape investments in essential services and facilities to meet our needs for years to come. I think the roadmap piece that's an important word in that sentence, and that it's meant to, as the village needs to make decisions in the years down the road, it has all the information it needs to understand which direction it could turn and what the implications or trade-offs may be. In that sense, it's going to be flexible. There'll be alternative studies. It won't just be one single set of outcomes, but you'll have alternatives. And it will also allow, by having alternatives, allow the residents to be able to inform it more when the decisions are being made. So when the board wants to, if there's another referendum in the future, perhaps that referendum has more than option. Or at least the discussion starts with more than one option that leads to a referendum. It goes into a bit about the bond proposal, and then here are the 5 guiding principles that we talked about before, that the facilities committee had defined: the enhancement of Irvington's distinctive character and charm, the equitable and efficient allocation of resources in proportion to our needs, improving the operational efficiency while considering near and long-term impacts to budget and local taxes, building a more diverse and resilient community with a range of housing choices including workforce and affordable. So again, while the primary focus is the facilities, we know that certain decisions about our facilities are going to enable more housing choices in the village, depending on what is considered. And then striving for the highest practical design and planning standards. We think that's paramount. And so the three scope items, as I talked about, facilities needs, site facility testing, and then community engagement. And in the community engagement, we think that our resident committee will still have a role to play. So it just won't be the consultants, but you'll continue to hear from us in some form or fashion, and we'll be out there trying to make sure that people are paying attention and coming providing input. On the screen now are some key dates. The request for proposals was issued in late March. We had actually 2 informational sessions up here in the village. The consultants issued just 3 questions, which were more process oriented and were answered by the village. Proposals are due on May 16th, and then there'll be a selection committee formed with the FPC members, village leadership, staff, all represented, to determine which of the firms would be brought in for oral presentations. It could be all of them or a fewer number, with the goal of notifying a selected consultant by June 20th and beginning the project in mid-July. Middle of the summer isn't great for engaging residents, but the idea would be that the consultant would start in the middle of the summer, really get their feet under them, be able to review all the existing documentation, speak with staff, and be informed when they come and speak with residents right after Labor Day. Everyone's back. And we think that this process, well, the length of the process is really up to the consultant to define, but we had put forward that we thought it was around 6 to 9 months, after which the board would endorse a plan for implementation, and then the first phases of implementation would follow. And that would be a number of things. It could be the pursuit of grants. It could be the design of specific facilities, like a new firehouse or new emergency services building. It could be property acquisition. It could be any number of things. It could be multiple things at once, but that would begin after. Yes.
When the committee came up with their 4 recommendations, which you said, none of which met all of the needs, were there any properties that were considered off limits and not looked at?
Almost the opposite. I mean, I think we looked at properties that we were pretty skeptical about. So I think that I don't know of any property that was rejected offhand.
No. They were all looked at. And in the table, it clearly identifies the challenges with some of them. You know, whether they be major environmental issues or regulatory issues. You know, if it's open space, that obviously has a community impact of using it. It also means you'd have to go to the state, ask to transfer some land. Doesn't mean it's impossible, but what we tried to do is really clearly articulate the challenge and the opportunity with every single site that was there. And some of it's timing, some of it's environmental, some of it's cost. Sometimes it's all of them. Yeah, but nothing was off limits. You know, there's some sites out there that have been studied in the past where we've hit a dead end, but we think that any consultant worth their salt is going to come in and ask the question again: is it worth looking at this or not? So we expect that to happen. Yeah.
Since you mentioned grants and a possible swap of lands with the state and so forth, are you considering involving some of our state elected representatives like Mary Chimsky and some of the county folks as well, who we may need in the back end in
Yeah.
securing those items?
I mean, I would think that the consultants would have that as part of their planning approach. And
Sorry, I just have to
Oh, yeah,
contextualize.
sorry. The question was, have we considered the engaging with some state or local officials as part of this planning effort to inform?
I think David could actually speak
Yeah.
to that because you have spoken to that before.
By the way, just noticing where all you guys are from. I spent 8 or 9 years living in Field Point. I spent 4 or 5 years living in
Downingwood?
Downingwood Court.
Okay.
So it was sort of in Downingwood for a while. And I've since moved downtown. So now I'm in the historic district. So I've got perspectives from all of those groups in my mind. In any case, the big picture here is, and you brought that question up, and the sort of the term is, well, one, we have all these facilities that are failing, and there's no question they're out of date, you know. So something has to be done. That means it costs money. So how do we pay for it? So ideally, it would be revenue neutral, where there is no tax burden at all. And that was perhaps the major failing of the bond. Bond was put up as, even though the board sort of knew that they could maybe get some grants, and it might be less than that, they put a proposal up that was, the building is going to cost 20 million. We're going to bond 20 million. Do you want that or not? And voters sort of said no. There were some who voted against it just because of that. There were others who voted against it because it was sort of an ugly building over there. So with this new looking at it, we're looking at, you know, how can we start going towards revenue neutral? And it's within the realm of possibilities, although nobody is going to choose it, to have it entirely financed on its own and cost the taxpayers nothing. Have it be revenue neutral. But the compromise to do that is one that we probably is going to be rejected. Although there were some people that would probably vote for that. And just as a wild extreme for that is probably the most valuable piece of real estate in the village of Irvington is the DPW site. If the village chose to rezone that for a 20-story building and then sell the property to a developer, the value of that property would pay for relocating the DPW most anywhere else. And there would be all this tax income that comes in from renting those units. So, you know, feasibly that's possible to do. It could actually be income positive and actually reduce the taxes of the rest of the village if one chose to do that. I don't think anybody's going to vote for a 20-story building on the waterfront. But the point is that in looking at doing it in a revenue neutral program, if we can choose to relocate without buying new land, using land that either we already own or we can swap or make a deal with a developer for, and so where we move anything, whether it be DPW, firehouse, police, or whatever it is, we can take the existing site and make the most positive use of income out of that. One way would be to sell it to a developer. What is actually turns out that because Westchester County is under this consent decree of being, having not enough affordable housing, there are huge grants available if you are willing to do affordable housing in your community. Michael and I are both on the housing committee and have been going to these land use things at Pace University that describe, how this works, et cetera. But essentially, the county is willing to give to the village the full market value of the property, buy it from the village for that amount, whatever millions of dollars that is, give it to the village to use however they care about it, and sell it back to the village for $1, as long as the village then gives it to a affordable housing developer to develop as affordable housing, which would then provide income from the site and provide us with a chunk of money to cover maybe not 100%, or maybe even 50% would be good for the cost of moving the police department or the fire department or the DPW. So that's how you sort of pay for it with grants and taxes. Now, the village has already taken one step towards that. There's this thing called transit-oriented development that's basically follows every public transportation line out of the city and is each state, and particularly New York State, is putting out funds for anybody that has a train station. If you build some housing near this train station, it could be affordable, it could be market rate, they don't care. But if you do it, we're going to give you money. And if you commit to doing it or thinking about it, you can be termed a pro-housing community. Irvington just got that designation a few months back. So we are an official pro-housing community because we're thinking about it. Well, that opens up like a whole series of grants from different agencies in the state and county that aren't necessarily related to housing. They're related to things like you could do pocket parks. You could do a trolley going up Main Street to take people from the train station. You could fund that from some of these other grants, recreational stuff, etc. So that's a big opening for us. But then your other question is, Irvington has been very lucky because there is a strong political presence in our town, the village board, and the voting populace that has supported local, county, and state politicians. So the last two mayors and hopefully the future mayor and board members are able to, call Andrea Stewart-Cousins up on the phone and talk to her and say, hey, and she was in town a little while back at a fundraiser. And one of the issues is parkland. Parkland is sort of untouchable. You can't use it for anything but a park once it's declared parkland, unless you go through the whole New York State Assembly has to vote on it, which they don't even want to bring that stuff up. So I said to Andrea, well, we have to get this little circumstance. Maybe we want to put a little affordable housing over here, but to do that, we have to move the DPW. But to do that, maybe we need to take a little piece of parkland. Is that going to be possible? And her answer was, yeah, Irvington, yeah, we can do that. Now, would she do it for other communities? Probably yes. But because Irvington has this relationship, it's that makes it positive. So our connections, the O'Hara Nature Center would not be here at all if we didn't get a state grant for that. It's directly related to our local politicians knowing our state assemblyman and woman and getting the money through them, excuse me. So does that answer that question? Or do you have a follow-up on that?
Thank you.
Can I make one point? And the point is that that is prime property. The waterfront property,
Yeah.
such as where DPW is prime property. And in my opinion, and it probably other people would agree, if we're going to maximize the tax base for the long run, grants tend to be either a one-time or not, they're not continuing into the future for many, many years and they're not guaranteed. We should consider, and this is, I know, part of the putting all the puzzle pieces together, that property would be very high-end property with a very big tax income, rather than low-income housing, and sprinkle low-income housing to other parts of the village, walking distance to the train. But I really think the public will have a very strong view on maximizing the tax base. And whether it's the Condé Nast, the Cosmopolitan building opportunities, or DPW land, that's where we can get a lot of bang for the buck in terms of revenue.
We agree with you completely. The board and the future board, which Larry and I hopefully are members of in November, we agree with you completely on that. And that's a close analysis of how you do that. Because affordable housing, it's not low-income housing, it's affordable housing.
Right, it's a
And-
different tax base level.
There's a different level of the tax. So it's a question of how you calculate that and compare that over a 20 or 30-year period. So that will definitely be looked at. And they're making compromises all over in New York City. They just did a major compromise with a developer. Rather than 10% affordable, the compromise with the Brooklyn Park Slope people was 40% affordable in order to get that project through, and they lowered the height of the building as well. So those are things that hopefully are
They're part of the discussion. They're part of the discussion. I think the important thing to remember is that the primary charge is to determine where our facilities go. And that the final plan will certainly have a recommendation and a discussion around what could go on the DPW site, but it won't be final and definitive as to that happening. There would be multiple steps: the grant pursuit, a rezoning, solicitation of developer proposals, multiple things. So multiple points of where the community can come out and have their voice heard about it. But what the plan will do is it'll lay out the pros and cons.
and put attach numbers to them, which is what we need to look at them. So, okay.
Other questions? It's been good discussions. Is there anything you would like us to keep in mind as we move forward here? Our next charge is really to help the village select a consultant. As you think about who you want to work with us, our resident community here, things that you'd find important. Yeah.
You mentioned that the 4 firms,
Yeah.
okay, that are part of the RP process are New York City based.
That's right.
I assume they have suburban experience, they have municipal planning experience, maybe planned communities. So that's important. Aesthetics is so important.
Yes. Aesthetics.
Feeling the vibe of the community, the culture, artistic, everything.
Yeah.
Should be considered.
That was top of mind for us.
I think I can make one little comment on that. It just so happens that, these major architecture firms are in New York. Well, a lot of those folks don't live in the city.
Yeah. I know 2
Yeah.
of them. Firms, yeah.
So what happens is they end up in one of these villages And then they end up at meetings like this, and they end up doing things like Mike, who is from a very sophisticated firm in New York City, does, and they starting to get involved in this. So I'm not sure 100% of the four of them have done projects in Westchester.
I think they all have.
Yeah, that's what I think they all. And
They also all have strong kind of academic components to them. These are firms where a lot of the principals are professors in major universities. We picked four extremely sophisticated firms. I don't think we could really go wrong with any of them, but we'll also be looking to them to see their methodology, how they plan to approach this process, and that will be a major aspect of selection. We may find that the firm whose approach is better, maybe we're not like knocked over by their designs, but they have such a clear approach to how they're going to how this project will fold out that maybe they end up being the preferred selection.
Well, I just want to say thank you for your time. If you put so much time into this and you're a professional architect, so I just want to thank you. It sounds like it took a big effort, and it was an excellent team to do the work, pre-work.
I mean, I'd like to think that, it's such a small community that given an opportunity to contribute to it, anyone would do it with their professional expertise. This just happens to be our moment to contribute. So
It's also great that you all showed up for this.
Right. Yes. Day like today. Yeah, sorry.
I know this is purely gonna be a guess, but what do you anticipate sort of a time frame of moving from today through the planning process to an additional bond, environmental permits and construction?
I don't know.
That is a big guess.
That's a big guess. To construction, it's definitely years. We're not talking months.
one of the biggest challenges is going to be when
It really
when it gets to the village board, they're going to look at options. And basically, that's what happened with the fire hall thing. There were a huge number of people connected to the fire department, it's a volunteer fire department. All those guys that have been working there all those years, names up on a wall, who were like, we want this. And they were yelling at the board, we want the new fire hall. Look, like it doesn't have anything here. We're killing ourselves out there. So the board was under pressure to we need to do something. And then there were the voters who voted against it. So when the Board of Trustees gets a proposal, it'll be a question of how clear the decision is. Whether we've had enough community engagement that when we get a room full of people like this, that a majority of the people in the room say, yeah, we can vote for this.
I would also say, if I was taking on this job, it would be one of the first questions I would ask the board. Because when you start to look at these planning options, the function of time is going to be critical to decide in between them. Some may be a whole building cycle or two longer than another to get to your critical project. You might have to build two things before you can free up a site for emergency services. That's two things that are going to cost you money too. If the board says, no, we need to move quicker, well, that narrows down your options and you're looking at a very different solution. So I think to answer your question, it's kind of impossible at this point until the board and the community vis-a-vis the board make that known to the consultant.
And sees what their options are.
And sees what the options are and what the trade-offs are. Cost, acquisition, fighting for land with the state. It could be any number of things.
We also were in a volatile economic climate too, that can change from 6 months. Things can be completely different than they are now.
Change next Wednesday.
Yeah.
But a building, it'll take 2 years to build a building. Take a year or more to design it. You have to fund it. You just start adding up the years.
Well, just to put some history on all of this, when I first moved to Irvington, I got off the train and I moved out. And there was no scenic Hudson Park.
Right.
there was a parking lot that had about 150 buses on it, and down Main Street twice a day. And there was a lumber yard, a large lumber yard that had delivery trucks going up and down Main Street. Well, we were able to figure out how to buy that, get it done. And the construction itself was, oh my God, they took out 4 feet of soil, Main Street, and brought back 4 feet of soil. That whole process was about 4 years, I think. If my memory serves me correctly. So by the time we have a new fire hall, is it 3 years? Is it 6 years?
Could be, you could think things in phases. Buildings don't have to be all built at once too.
It would be nice to layer it so that they're, let's say move the fire department, engage a developer to build whatever, that produces revenue. So it's an offset faster.
Yeah.
Rather than doing everything and then delaying the offset.
Or if you're co-locating, you could build a fire department on a site that could then accommodate to the police department at a later date. There's so many different ways to look at this. We've got to first figure out what we need to build and do that in a really rigorous way. It's not a Christmas wish list that we can justify, especially when we go for grant money. And you can say, we really need this because of X and X regulation or because of X and Y best practices. Figure out how big it's got to be. Then you figure out where it can go, and then how the pieces go together, as you say, how you can break it up and make it something that meets the expectations of the community in terms of cost.
I'd like to also throw out one other third wild card into this whole plan is Irvington has resisted for 30 years the term shared services.
Yeah.
And if there was a decision that how to reduce our cost for building new buildings and for our services in this town that our taxes are paying for, having shared services with another adjoining village or not would be a significant change in what's needed and what it costs.
Yeah, and the consultants will be asked to look at that. I mean, it's a conversation that the village needs to lead, but they'll be asked to look at that as well. And they'll also be asked to look at the fire department, what the implications of a professional fire department would have on space budget as well. They require a different amount of space.
Right, just to contextualize that, the fire department volunteer, it's a challenge to get volunteers. If they're going to struggle to do that, what is their longevity? If we build a firehouse for a volunteer department and in then 5 or 6 years, it's no longer a volunteer department, what does that mean for taxpayers and for safety?
It's all the plan will have the what ifs sort of sussed out. So you'll have a preferred plan, a final plan, so to speak, but the what ifs will have some answers to them. They may require you to come back and do more study years down the road, but they'll be addressed.
And by the way, demographics are graphing volunteer fire companies as going out and going towards profession. And that's a whole different set of tax implications and building implications to do that. But that also relates to housing because volunteers are in a certain age category. And Irvington is having a decrease in population in that age category because of affordability.
Not a lot of 20 and 30-year-olds.
Gotta give them tax breaks, you gotta give them medical benefits and other stuff to incentivize.
There's also the variables can be paralyzing. And, at some point, the village needs to sit down and say, we want to build a firehouse. If we want to build a firehouse, we need to kind of organize this process in such a way that becomes our goal. We can get, I know just from, Mike and I working together, you know, we'll get into these big discussions about everything from, you know, how to, you know, create, you know, more grand public spaces, the iconic importance of a firehouse, all these issues that can determine this decision. But at the end of the day, if what you need is a firehouse in the next couple of years, then that's gotta be the focus.
And if Dobbs Ferry wants one.
I served on the Greenberg Fire Consolidation Commission a few years ago. Nothing came of it, but we studied, they have 3 firehouses, completely different types of buildings, tax funding. Fairview has no money, the building's falling apart. Hartsdale's beautiful, state-of-the-art, Edgemont's, so forth. They are combined volunteer and paid firefighters. It was a shit show. Believe me. And there's a lot to consider, the politics and beyond what the community is thinking of. It becomes very challenging. Imagine shared services as well, even sharing things simple as ordering paper and staplers and so forth. Got their little fiefdoms. They don't want to give it up.
I can tell you from another example, school districts, when there is a master plan in Albany to connect school districts that nobody in this room probably knows about. And the two districts don't want any part of each other theoretically. I can't tell you the names of the school districts because somehow that it'll be on the front page of the newspaper. But one district felt that school district wise, that the other district was economically, socially, et cetera, beneath them. But yet it's on a master plan that's sitting up in state education in Albany. And there were some districts that want to remain independently and they think they can make their, I don't use the word make it loosely, but they think they can make their constituency pay for remaining independent by avoiding even the concept of merging with another school district. They want their own fiefdom. Steve's word.
Libraries too.
Right.
And that includes both the taxpayers and the administrators. They're sort of in collusion to do that.
Having been on a school board, just in the defense, I'll say there's also a lot of shared services among our region school districts. We have BOCES, so whether you want to, when school districts buy supplies, a lot of those are shared.
No, you're correct. And I'm going back a number of years because I was the president of the Board of Education in Valhalla, probably before you were born. And
We can talk after.
but a lot of the consolidation that BOCES is doing now didn't exist back then.
That's right. Yeah.
So.
But that's another way to think about shared services. Sometimes we still have our own football teams, but you know, if someone wants to be learn to be a chef, they go to the BOCES program and not necessarily to the Irvington.
Any other questions? I'll just say, if anything comes up, I think there's probably a way to get in touch with us on the website.
They can do it through Larry Show for the village administrator, and then he can connect.
And just, stay tuned to the board agendas. I imagine this will be coming up towards the selection of the consultant, and there may be a discussion there. And if everything stays on track, it's in mid-July, we should be able to announce the beginning of the project formally. And then really get started with the community in September, I think.
It's also great for all of you to talk to your neighbors, tell them you were here, talk about what we're doing. The more public this is, the more effective.
Can I ask how you found out about it? How did you know about today's meeting?
I found out through Jeff Blewick.
Okay, the TIF email. Did he send an email out?
He did.
Yeah, about.
I subscribe to I'm on the village site, so they send me notices when.
Okay, so you saw it from the village?
Yes.
Okay, well, so we actually have a specific email list of folks who are associated or have expressed interest. So we can also add you to that list so that every time we send something out, you get that email. But yeah, we're trying to reach out to various organizations and on social media and through the village. So again, you can Google Village of Irvington Facility Plan Committee, and you find all the map, the spreadsheet on the website page on the Village of Irvington site. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
You.